you have outdid yourself with this new finding of the X Factor. And if you watched the ESPN3 broadcast yesterday that Jim was on with Adam Jackson, you might have already got a taste of who it is, but I applaud you with this effort here because it's a very good find.
Well, the X Factor changes. I mean, depending on who you're playing and who's hot. But this guy doesn't. From the start of the season to the end, the numbers bear out that when he plays well, CMU wins, and when CMU loses, it's because he typically doesn't play well. That's normally how I define an X Factor, and that's not counting the best player. The best player normally has the biggest swing on the game. This player actually has a bigger impact than you think. And I think I'm going to say his name, you're going to go, duh. Rayshon Simmons.
Duh.
X Factor. 11-0 when he gets 5 or more assists in a game. 12-1 when he scores at least 10 points.
What was the loss?
The only loss?
Bradley?
No, Ball State on the road.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
The only game, he scored 14 in that game. Other than that, he has been a guy where when you get 5 assists, 11-0. And I think that's really noteworthy because Chris Fowler shoulders a huge load. We talked about it. Leads the program now in career assists. Chris Fowler runs the show most of the game. When Rayshon Simmons has the ball and he's able to penetrate and kick and get other shooters involved and you don't have to wear down Chris, teams now have to guard 2 of those guys that can create for so many great shooters. So I think because of that, Rayshon Simmons, you can pencil him in when he comes in and runs the offense. And he actually ran the offense more than Chris Fowler for a good chunk of the game against Ball State, especially early. Rayshon Simmons is the X factor on this team because he gives you something that no other team can boast, and that's another guard that's averaging nearly 5 assists a game behind one of the best point guards in terms of assists in the entire country. Those two on the same team, that guy is your backup guard. That's the X factor, and he's the guy that you could point to in CMU victories more than anybody as why they do win these games.
Well, I mean, obviously Chris is the guy on this team.
Right.
To call him an X factor is kind of moronic. Yeah, you can't do that because he's going to make an impact either way. But, I mean, you take a look at the numbers, to have an off guard, because I think that's what he fits best as. He's not a true point guard, I would say. He's more of an off-the-ball guy.
I don't know,
but
though.
I think yesterday, or when was the game? Friday? I'm getting my days mixed up. Yeah, it was yesterday. And I think yesterday, most of the time, as you mentioned, when Chris is not in the game, the offense is facilitated through Rayshon. But yesterday, there was times when Chris was on the court together with Ray, and Rayshon was the one bringing the ball up, and he was the one facilitating the offense. So to have the luxury where you can go say, hey, Chris, you're our best player. You don't need to be the point guard. You can go play off ball for a second, run off a screen, get the ball, and then facilitate, and have, Rayshon Simmons be the guy who facilitates, on top of having Braylon Rayson who can pass as well, on top of having multiple bigs who can pass as well. So when Rayshon gets 5+ assists, you have Chris who averages 6 to 7 assists a game. I mean, that's already double-digit assists on field goal makes, and that's not counting anybody else on the team. So you can see why it leads to so much success.
Well, think about this. When Fowler's in the game, he's not a great three-point shooter, but you have to put your best on-ball defender on Chris Fowler.
Yeah,
you have
which
to.
Leaves a subpar defender potentially, or at least a matchup, deficit for the opposite team.
Well, and Rayshon went right at Sean Sellers, who's potentially the freshman of the year at Ball State.
He was no match.
Right, he just bulldozed him.
Yeah.
I mean, crossover dribble, get him backed up all the way to the hoop.
He might be the freshman of the year on offense. Defensively, he lacked a little bit.
And that's the thing. When Rayshon does that and punishes you, and all of a sudden you're bringing help over, and you already have your second or third defender on him, you're really breaking down defenses, and he's very unselfish. I mean, he's kicking out to tons of guys, and that's why that 5 or more assists, it happens a lot. And that's why they win some of these games. I think it's one of those things when you see him playing well, you know they're going to win. It's so much so, they've lost 5 games. CMU now 20-5. 5 of those losses, Rayshon scored 0, 1, or 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
That tells the story. Really, when you look back at some of these games, he's a guy you have to have, and they have had him. Because the shooting is nice. You have to get shots. Teams will just flank out and cover shooters. You have to be able to get that penetration. Even when Chris is on the bench or on the floor, Rayshon Simmons does that. He's your X factor at Central Michigan.